The evilest supervillain plans to pull up the greatest escape trick of all time. Will he be able to do it successfully? Let's find out in the movie. After a devastating incident called the Pulse, numbers of people start mutating and acquiring different superpowers. With the rise of superpowered individuals using their abilities for villainy, San Tiburon, the world's most dangerous maximum security penitentiary, is designed to withhold the evilest and most powerful supervillains. With a device called Power Nullifying Equipment, or PNE, which is attached to every prisoner's leg, no one in the prison can use their power. However, managed by the corrupt warden overseer Devlin, San Tiburon is not created to rehabilitate the criminal, but to give him hell. One night in an underground car park, a group of goons is punishing one of their members named Jack for failing his mission. Jack was supposed to kill a vigilante called Payback, but ends up killing the man's family instead. Suddenly, Payback appears out of nowhere and starts killing the goons one by one. But when he's down to the last two goons, he finds out that they both have superpowers. One of them is a mutant, while the other one is bulletproof. The bulletproof gives him a decent fight, but Payback just ends him by slamming him face first to the ground. On the other hand, all it takes is one punch for Payback to take down the mutant. Thinking that he is here to save him, Jack thanks Payback, but it turns out that the vigilante just saves Jack to kill him on his own terms. Just then, he shoots Jack in the head. Shortly after, the police arrive and Payback doesn't resist nor tries to escape. A news report then shows that Payback has been sentenced to life imprisonment at San Tiburon. And so far, he managed to kill over 50 criminals during his vigilantism. At the same time in the prison, Devlin is intervened about the rumors that are being linked to the supervillain prison. The female anchor questions him about the issue of inhumane acts towards the prisoners, which Devlin denies. He says that whatever they are doing to the prisoners is what they deserve. He also proudly states that during his term, nobody, not even the most powerful supervillain, has managed to escape San Tiburon. A little later, Payback and 3 more prisoners arrive in the prison. There, they are greeted by Captain Brody, who explains to them the use of PNEs. While doing so, Officer Liz scans the prisoners. Upon discovering the ability of the prisoner named Diego is empathy, she laughs at him for having such a lame power. When she scans Payback, another officer mocks him, saying that he's not intimidating in person as he is on TV. But when Payback scares the officer, he immediately gets away from him, making Payback laugh. At this time, Liz suddenly punches Payback in the stomach and he falls to his knees. As it turns out, Liz has the ability of super strength and she warns him to never piss her off again. Sometime later, Payback goes to the playground and immediately gets into a fight with another prisoner named Jim. Yet, instead of stopping them, Liz and the other officer just stand there watching the 2 prisoners brawl. Devlin is eating popcorn while watching the fight from his monitor, looking like he's having fun watching them. Meanwhile, Diego gets an acquaintance with another prisoner named Gordon. Seeing the guards doing nothing, he asks Gordon if the guards will just let Payback and Jim fight. According to Gordon, they will not stop the fight unless someone is about to die. When Jim elbows Payback on the nose and makes him bleed, Payback draws a cross in his face using his own blood and summons all his strength to fight. He eventually gets the upper hand, but when he is about to finish Jim off, the guards step in and electrocute both prisoners. Liz orders Payback to stand down, but he refuses. Because of that, he receives a beating from the officer. After the commotion, Gordon gives Diego a quick tour of the prison while telling him about some of the basic rules of the place. The first rule is to never make a mess, literally and figuratively. Next is to not allow any prisoner to drag him into trouble. If he ever gets caught by the guards doing something illegal, his sentence will be extended. And lastly, he should never be in debt with anyone else, regardless of whether they're guards or co-prisoners. After learning all the rules, Diego asks about the conspiracy theory that there are some illegal experiments done with the supervillains in San Tiburon. According to Gordon, there used to be an experiment about how to disable the ability of the prisoners, but that was long before. This experiment resulted in the development of power-nullifying equipment. Now, there are no more experiments, legal or illegal, done in the prison. Gordon then asks Diego what crime he committed for him to be sent to San Tiburon. As it turns out, Diego did nothing serious but only drove a getaway car. However, he got caught and sentenced to 5 years of imprisonment. At this time, he asks Gordon if the Lobe, the worst criminal in history, is truly in San Tiburon prison. It is said that the Lobe has mind-controlling power and once mind-controlled a mother into killing her own family. Suddenly, Gordon starts whispering and pointing to a cell behind him, saying that the cell of the Lobe is there. He then warns Diego that the last person he wants to mess with is the Lobe because he's the most dangerous villain detained in the prison at the moment. When they are talking about him, the Lobe gets transferred into a dark room where he faces his parole trial. It is his 4th time applying for parole. Unfortunately for him, this time he gets the same answer as before. Thinking that he may never have the chance to get out again, he curses and mocks the interviewer and the hearing. Afterward, Devlin suddenly appears and talks about his retirement, saying that staying in this prison didn't make him rich. That is why he is threatening the Lobe to transfer his billion fortune to his account, seeming to have an ace against the supervillain. As a powerless prisoner, the Lobe has no other choices. Their conversation ends with him agreeing to give all his money to Devlin. Meanwhile, at the clinic, the prison doctor, Dr. Isabel, is attending to Payback and 2 other prisoners. There, she witnesses how Liz threatens to hurt Diego, who is just picking up the trash. When the officer is gone, Isabel apologizes to Diego, saying that not everyone will hurt him. Just minutes later, Liz comes back and notifies the doctor that the Lobe is ready for his psychological assessment. But without her noticing, Payback, who just woke up, sneaks behind the doctor and chokes her into the air until she loses consciousness. After that, he turns his attention to the Lobe and wants to take the opportunity to kill him. Facing this powerful killer, the Lobe doesn't panic and keeps his calm. With him giving a smile to Payback, Diego immediately arrives to stop him and restrains him long enough until a guard arrives. After the incident, Diego becomes quite famous to the other prisoners and gains their respect. Gordon tells him he did a good job and that he must utilize this respect to survive inside the prison. A little later, a mutant named Darius, who works as a personal guard for the Lobe, approaches their table to tell Diego that his boss wants to talk to him. When Diego arrives at his cell, the Lobe thanks him for saving his life. He then recruits Diego to be Darius's substitute in the kitchen to provide him with all the equipment he needs. In exchange for Diego's service, the Lobe guarantees that he will get him out of prison once his plan is done. Although tempted, Diego still has doubts and tells the Lobe that he will think about it. Meanwhile, in the warden's office, Felicia, Devlin's assistant, reminds him that having a deal with the Lobe is like having a deal with the devil. But he just argues that as the warden of the prison for supervillains, he needs to be worse than them. And if she wants to be the next warden, Felicia needs to have the courage to be worse as well. Then, he shows her 2 different letters, one of which writes her recommendation as the next warden after Devlin retires, and the other letter writes all her violations. So, how she will act will determine what letter will Devlin submit to the higher officials. The next day, after checking on Payback once more, Isabel releases him from the clinic. Concurrently, Gordon is having his parole trial. By showing his best behavior to the interviewer, Gordon tries to convince him that he's a changed man now. But when the interviewer points out that he is not suited to be part of the community, Gordon gets triggered and curses him. Because of his bad attitude, his parole is denied and he is dragged out of the room. This failure makes him completely lose hope. At the cafeteria, Diego approaches Gordon and asks if he's fine, to which the man says yes. Just seconds later, Darius passes by their table and puts a broken fork down. Then, Gordon uses the broken fork to unlock his PNE. As it turns out, the Lobe has convinced him to start a riot. After thanking Diego for being his friend, he suddenly starts provoking the officer guarding the cafeteria. The guard notices that his PNE is missing and starts to call for backup. Just then, Gordon charges his body using a live wire and shoots electricity at the guard, killing him. Diego quickly runs to the guard, asking Gordon what he has done, but it's already too late. At this moment, Gordon overloads the electricity of the whole prison, causing it to shut down completely. This is also the signal for Jim and his men to start a riot on the field. But before Payback and Jim get into a fight again, they suddenly get electrocuted. As it turns out, Gordon already brings the power back up in the prison before he runs away. While all of this is happening, the Lobe is just relaxing in his cell. After the incident, Felicia shows Devlin a feed of what happened in the cafeteria, and the man cannot believe how Gordon got his powers back. Because of this, they conduct a manhunt for Gordon all over San Tiburon. Gordon, on the other hand, stops at the clinic, peacefully looking outside the windows. Suddenly, he gets a smack to the head from Liz. She reports the situation to Devlin, and the warden orders her to kill him. At first, Liz doesn't want to do it, but she has the order to comply with. But what's weird is that Gordon lets Liz kill him easily, even though he can just easily electrocute her. The whole incident is then covered up in the news. Devlin fabricates a story that Gordon tried to escape, but he falls to his death, and one of the news anchors seems to be on Devlin's side. Going back to San Tiburon, Diego is on a call with his wife when Liz suddenly cuts the call to inform him that Devlin wants a word with him. In the solitary section, just next to the Lobe's cell, Devlin shows Diego the extreme solitary confinement cell to scare him. Inside a thunderstorm-like atmosphere, and it can kill a man in just 1 second. Then, he interrogates Diego about what the Lobe asked him to do, to which he reveals that the Lobe simply asked him to take a shift in the kitchen. After hearing this, Devlin lets him go, but he also reminds him to report to him everything that the Lobe tells him to do, starting from here on. After his conversation with Diego, Devlin proceeds to talk to the Lobe about the recent incident. However, the villain insists that he has nothing to do with it. Hearing this, Devlin gets pissed and reminds the Lobe of their deal, saying that if he doesn't commit to the deal before his retirement, he will put him in the extreme solitary confinement cell. The Lobe is clearly aware that he can never get out of prison by himself, which is why he needs Devlin's help. So he promises Devlin that he will surely get the money on the day of his retirement on the condition that he gives him the Wi-Fi password of the prison. Devlin is glad to hear that and just gives the password to him. Meanwhile, Felicia, Brody, and another officer are down in the basement to check on the electrical system of the place. There, they talk about what happened to Gordon, and Felicia is not happy that they killed a prisoner. Brody feels the same, but as the captain of the guards, he thinks the image of the prison is more important. Just then, the other officer says he can fix the generator. All he needs is some help and enough time. Hearing this, Felicia says they better fix it before Devlin steps down on the position. Sometime later, the reconstruction of the basement and the electrical system begins. When everything is done, Felicia notifies Devlin about it and asks if there's any news about her promotion. According to Devlin, the boards are still deliberating, but he assures her that she still has a good chance of becoming the next warden. As the day of Devlin's retirement is coming soon, everyone in the prison seems to be nervous and expects something big will happen. In the solitary section, Diego talks to the Lobe and asks what is truly happening. Hearing that he's panicking, the Lobe tells him that he needs to relax and assures him that he will get him out of San Tiburon. All he needs to do is lay low until Friday, Devlin's last day on the job. The next morning has come, and Felicia receives an email regarding Brody's candidacy for being the next warden. Angry, she storms to Devlin's office and confronts him about it. According to Devlin, it is the board's decision and he has nothing to do with it. He then assures her that it will be an honest competition between her and Brody. The day of Devlin's retirement finally arrives, and this is also the moment of truth for Felicia and Brody. As expected, Brody gets the position, and Felicia is visibly disappointed about it. To add salt to the injury, Devlin recommends to Brody to keep Felicia as his assistant, calling her a viable asset of the prison. After his announcement, he goes straight to the Lobe to get his billions of retirement funds from him. Handing the Loeb a tablet, Devlin is now prepared to be a billionaire. But instead of beginning the wire transfer of the money, the Loeb just disables all of the PNE inside Santiburon. This causes a massive riot in which the prisoners are now free to use their abilities. Seeing this, the officers are forced to retreat, except for Liz, who can fight the rioting supervillains. Meanwhile, Diego, who's currently on shift at the clinic, starts suffering from all the feelings filling his head upon his abilities' return. Luckily for him, Isabel is there to help and calm him. All the while, Felicia warns Devlin about the whole situation. But when he's about to go out, he gets locked inside the Loeb cell. As the riot continues, the prisoners start wreaking havoc, beating and killing every guard, even another prisoner that comes their way. Furthermore, Payback and Jim take this chance to settle their beef against each other. However, because of his hardened body, Jim is clearly having the upper hand in the fight. Luckily for Payback, Jim gets distracted by another prisoner, allowing him to escape. Just inside the compound, Brody radios Felicia and asks what he should do. According to her, he must reset the electrical system in the basement, and that will allow the PNE to be reactivated. The problem is, Jim sees Brody and starts following him. When Brody reaches the basement, his connection to Felicia starts to weaken, making him not understand which generator he should be looking for. To make matters worse, Jim also reaches the basement and starts to hunt for him. Hearing that somebody is coming, Brody quickly hides and attempts to escape Jim, but fails miserably. Left with no other choice, Brody tries to fight, but he doesn't hurt Jim even a little bit. In turn, Jim slams him on the wall where the generator is. Just then, Brody remembers that it's the generator that they fixed before and he needs to restart it. Once he breaks away from Jim, he breaks the pipe, releasing a gas straight into his face. And when he stumbles into the generator, it short circuits, resulting in Jim's death. At the same time in the Loeb cell, the warden doesn't seem to care about what is happening since it is his last day. All he cares about now is the money he will get from the Loeb. At this moment, the Loeb reveals to him that it was him that disables all the PNE by jeopardizing the security system of the place using the password for Wi-Fi. As it turns out, Devlin stupidly uses the same password for the prison's Wi-Fi and security system, allowing him to easily access it. However, Devlin still thinks that he's winning, especially since the money transfer has just been completed. Yet, he doesn't know that the Loeb is not yet done and has one more trick up his sleeves. Looking directly at the Loeb, Devlin feels something is off with his brain. Then all of a sudden, he punches the Loeb. After a while, the power gets back and all the PNEs get reactivated again. With the prisoners losing their powers, the riot eventually ends. The guard also arrives at the Loeb cell and unlocks the door. Devlin then orders him to put the Loeb into the extreme solitary confinement cell. Outside, Felicia is waiting for him, and to her surprise, Devlin assigns her as the new warden of Santiburon. Meanwhile, Payback is sitting on top of the bodies of dead prisoners while laughing victoriously. After a few days, Diego visits Isabel at the clinic to tell her that he's being transferred to where his empathy ability will be more useful. At the same time, Felicia just moves into her new office as the new warden. On the other hand, Brody decides to quit and gives the captain rank to Liz. The movie ends with Devlin picking up the newly released Darius, revealing that he is actually the Loeb living in Devlin's body. Corrective measure is a great approach to prison movies by adding superpowers to the plot. It's like watching Suicide Squad's background characters surviving their daily lives in prison. Plus, the good music definitely adds up to the hype. Although not a perfect movie, it is still a great movie to watch.